The
Hello
air in the
everyone,
courtroom was thick enough
and
to be
welcome to
carved,
my
a
General
heavy,
Hospital
silent
official
weight
channel.
pressing down
Hope
on every
everyone is
spectator,
having a
every
wonderful
juror,
day.
every officer
Before
of
we
the court.
begin, please hit the
The fate
subscribe
of
button
Rocco
and give this
Falconeri,
video
a
a
young
thumbs
man
up.
accused of a crime that had torn the fabric of Port Charles, hung in a precarious balance. The prosecution had painted a picture of a reckless, irresponsible youth, his actions leading to a catastrophic chain of events. The defense had fought valiantly, arguing misfortune, a tragic accident, a life derailed by a single, fleeting moment of poor judgment. But as the trial neared its conclusion, a palpable sense of despair had begun to settle over the defense's table. It seemed the jury was leaning toward a conviction, a verdict that would shatter not only Rocco's future but that of his entire family. All eyes were fixed on the witness stand, where the final witness for the defense had been called. Dante Falconeri, Rocco's own father, a man whose life had been defined by service and justice, sat with a back straight as an iron rod, though his eyes betrayed a storm of conflicting loyalties. He had testified to his son's character, his fundamental goodness, the unlikelihood of malicious intent. The cross-examination had been brutal, picking apart his paternal bias, forcing him to concede points that visibly pained him. As he stepped down, the gavel seemed poised to fall, signaling the end of the evidentiary phase. But then, a movement from the back of the room. A figure, pale and determined, rose from the public gallery. It was Danny Morgan. For weeks, he had been a ghost in the periphery of this drama, a constant, silent presence supporting his best friend, his brother in all but blood. He had watched the proceedings with a growing anguish, his own internal turmoil a private war waged behind a carefully constructed mask of stoic support. Now, that mask was crumbling. As Dante passed him, their eyes met for a fraction of a second, a silent communication passing between them that few in the room could decipher. "Your Honor," Danny's voice, though initially unsteady, cut through the stagnant air with surprising clarity. "I need to speak. I have information that pertains to this case." A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge, a stern woman with a face etched by decades of legal battles, peered over her spectacles. "Young man, you are not on the witness list. The evidentiary portion of this trial is concluding." "Please, Your Honor," Danny implored, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides. "It's crucial. It goes to the heart of what really happened that night. I can't let this go on without speaking the truth." The defense attorney, seeing a potential lifeline, was immediately on her feet. "Your Honor, given the gravity of the charges and the pursuit of absolute justice, I would ask the court to exercise its discretion. If Mr. Morgan has new, material evidence, it would be a miscarriage of justice to silence him." The prosecution objected, vehemently, arguing procedure, the lateness of the hour, the potential for coached testimony. But the seed of doubt had been planted in the judge's mind. She studied Danny, seeing not a troublemaker, but a young man visibly tormented, his conscience a physical weight upon his shoulders. "Approach the bench, Mr. Morgan," she commanded. Danny walked the long aisle, every step echoing in the profound silence. He took the oath, his right hand trembling slightly as he raised it, and settled into the witness chair that had just been vacated. He looked at Rocco, whose face was a canvas of confusion and a flicker of desperate hope. He looked at his parents, Sam McCall and Jason Morgan, seated together, their expressions a mixture of alarm and profound foreboding. They knew their son. They knew that look. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. The defense attorney began, her tone gentle, coaxing. "Danny, you've been a close friend of Rocco's for many years, is that correct?" "Yes," Danny's voice was a hoarse whisper. "He's my best friend. Like a brother." "And you were with him on the night of the incident, were you not?" "I was. Earlier in the evening. We were together." "Can you tell the court what you witnessed? What you know that you haven't yet shared?" Danny took a deep, shuddering breath, his gaze dropping to his own hands, as if the truth were written there. The courtroom leaned in, a single, collective organism holding its breath. "It's my fault," he said, the words so soft they were almost lost. Then, he looked up, his eyes finding Rocco's, filled with a bottomless well of apology and pain. "It was me. I'm the one who is responsible. Rocco is taking the fall for something I did. The gasp that went through the room was audible, a sharp, collective intake of shock. The judge's gavel banged once, a perfunctory call for order that was largely ignored in the ensuing chaos. Rocco's mouth hung open, his eyes wide with disbelief. From the gallery, Sam let out a choked sob, her hand flying to her mouth, while Jason's entire body went rigid, his protective instincts on high alert, yet powerless in the face of the judicial process. "Can you please clarify that for the court, Danny?" the defense attorney pressed, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was a bombshell, one she had not anticipated. "The car," Danny said, his voice gaining a terrible, resigned strength. "It was me behind the wheel. Not Rocco." The prosecution was on its feet, shouting objections, hearsay, fabrication, a desperate stunt. But the judge silenced them with a sharp gesture, her eyes never leaving Danny's face. "Continue, Mr. Morgan. But be advised, you are under oath." And so, the story began to spill out, a tragic narrative that had been buried under a mountain of fear and a misguided promise. Danny painted a picture of that night, one vastly different from the one the court had come to know. It had started as a celebration, a moment of youthful triumph after their high school graduation. He and Rocco, along with a few friends, had been at a party. There was alcohol. Danny, never one for heavy drinking, had nonetheless indulged more than he should have. Rocco was the designated driver, Danny explained, his eyes glued to the defense attorney, unable to look at his family. He was always the responsible one. He had a single beer, early on. I had several. I was feeling the effects, but I thought I was fine. Invincible, you know? Like kids do. The plan was to drive to another friend's house. Rocco had the keys. But in the parking lot, an argument ensued. A trivial thing, about music, about directions, the kind of amplified disagreement that only seems significant through an alcoholic haze. "I got mad," Danny confessed, shame coloring his words. "Stupid and proud. I told him I was fine to drive, that he wasn't my dad. I grabbed the keys from his hand. We struggled for a second, and I shoved him. He fell back. I just got in the driver's seat and started the car." He described Rocco's frantic protests, his pleas for Danny to stop, to get out of the car. But Danny, fueled by liquid courage and stubbornness, had refused. He pulled out of the parking lot, the car weaving slightly. "I was overconfident. I thought I had it under control." Rocco was in the passenger seat, yelling at me to pull over. I told him to shut up. I was going too fast. I know I was going too fast. Then came the moment that had irrevocably altered their lives. A dog, a beloved family pet, darted into the road from behind a parked car. It was a split-second event. Danny, his reflexes dulled by alcohol, overcorrected. The car swerved violently, mounted the curb, and slammed into a fire hydrant before careening into the front porch of a house. The impact was sickening, the sound of rending metal and shattering wood, a noise that now haunted Danny's every waking moment. In the immediate, stunned silence that followed the crash, the gravity of the situation crashed down upon them both. They were both dazed, but relatively unharmed, a miracle in itself. But the damage was done. The porch was destroyed. The car was totaled. And the dog, the innocent animal, had not survived the initial impact. Panic, cold and absolute, had set in. "We got out of the car," Danny continued, his voice cracking. "People were coming out of their houses. Sirens were in the distance. I was sobering up fast, and all I could feel was terror. I looked at Rocco and I begged him. I said, they'll destroy me. My record is clean. But if they find out I was drinking, my future, my dad, it's over." The plea hung in the air, a toxic testament to a friendship twisted by fear. Danny, the son of Jason Morgan, a man with a complicated and often notorious history, lived with a constant, unspoken pressure to be the good one, the one who broke the cycle. A DUI, an accident involving property damage and the death of a pet, would not just be a mark on his record, it would be a public spectacle, a failure that would reflect on his entire family, and worse, it could have serious legal repercussions given his age and the circumstances. Rocco just looked at me, Danny whispered, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. He looked at me, and he saw how scared I was. And he said, okay. Just. Okay. He told me to get in the passenger seat. He took the fall. Right there, when the police arrived, he said he was driving. He said he'd swerved to avoid the dog and lost control. He never mentioned me. He never mentioned the alcohol. The arrangement, born of panic and a twisted sense of loyalty, had held. In the chaotic aftermath, with the focus on the damage and the shock, the police had accepted Rocco's confession at face value. The narrative was set in stone, Rocco Falconeri, the driver, responsible for the accident. The charges followed, magnified by the emotional weight of the dead pet and the significant property damage. I thought it would blow over, Danny said, his self-loathing palpable. I thought it would be a traffic ticket, some community service. I never imagined it would go this far. I never thought he'd be on trial, facing this. He gestured helplessly at the courtroom, at the system that was poised to condemn his friend. I've been dying inside, every single day. Watching him, watching his family, seeing the strain it's put on everyone. I couldn't live with myself anymore. I can't let him be punished for my mistake. My cowardice. The silence that followed his testimony was absolute, more powerful than any outburst. It was the sound of a narrative shattering, of lives being upended for a second time. The defense attorney slowly sat down, her mind reeling. The prosecution looked furious, but also uncertain. The case they had so carefully built had just evaporated. But the legal machinery, once set in motion, does not stop on a dime. The judge, her face a mask of judicial impartiality, though her eyes held a deep, weary sadness, called for a recess. The jury was escorted out, their faces a mixture of astonishment and confusion. The gallery erupted into a cacophony of voices the moment the door closed behind them. In the Falconeri camp, the emotions were a maelstrom. Lulu, Rocco's mother, was weeping, clutching Dante's arm, her feelings a turbulent mix of relief for her son and horror at the deception. Dante himself was a statue, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. His career was built on finding the truth, and the truth had been living in his own home, eating at his own table, all while his son faced a potential conviction. The betrayal he felt was a physical ache, but it was directed not just at Danny, but at the impossible situation itself. For the Morgans, it was a different kind of devastation. Sam rushed to Danny's side as he stepped down from the stand, but he flinched away from her touch, too consumed by his own shame to accept comfort. Why, Danny? Why didn't you come to us? Sam pleaded, her voice thick with tears. Because I was scared, he shot back, his voice breaking. And because I was selfish. I didn't want to be the screw-up. I didn't want to disappoint you and Dad. I didn't want everyone in Port Charles to look at me and see just another Morgan disaster. Jason placed a steadying hand on Sam's shoulder, his own expression grim. He understood pressure. He understood the weight of a name. He saw his own youthful mistakes reflected in his son's terrified eyes, and a profound sense of failure washed over him. Had his own legacy, his own history, contributed to the pressure that made his son feel he had to hide such a terrible truth? The most poignant scene, however, was between the two young men at the center of the storm. As officers began to lead Rocco back to a holding cell, pending the likely dismissal of charges, Danny broke away from his parents and approached him. Rocco, man. I am so sorry, Danny said, his voice raw. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was a coward. You were trying to protect me, and I let you. I'm the worst friend in the world. Rocco looked at him, his expression unreadable for a long moment. The friendship they had shared, a bond forged in childhood and solidified through adolescence, now had a fissure running through its very core. There was anger, yes. A deep, simmering anger at the weeks of fear and uncertainty, at the strain on his family, at the public shame. But there was also a residue of that original, fatal loyalty. You should have told me you were going to do that, Rocco said quietly, his voice flat. You shouldn't have just dropped it in the middle of the trial. I know. I couldn't watch them convict you. I couldn't. I could have handled it, Danny, Rocco replied, a flicker of his old strength returning. I made a choice that night, too. A stupid one, but I made it. I chose to protect you. I guess I just didn't know what the cost was going to be. He didn't forgive him. Not then. The wound was too fresh, too deep. But he also didn't condemn him. He simply turned and allowed himself to be led away, leaving Danny standing alone in the middle of the courtroom, the architect of his own ruin and the unlikely agent of his friend's salvation. When the court reconvened, the outcome was inevitable. The prosecution, their case in tatters, had no choice but to move for the dismissal of all charges against Rocco Falconeri. The judge granted it without hesitation. The words "case dismissed" should have been a moment of unadulterated joy, but in the Falconeri family, they were met with a complex, weary relief. They had their son back, but the cost had been the revelation of a painful, foundational crack in the trust between their family and the Morgans. For Danny, the ordeal was far from over. As he walked out of the courthouse, flanked by his shell-shocked parents, he was not a free man. He had confessed under oath to driving under the influence, leaving the scene of an accident, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The district attorney would have no choice but to file charges. The legal consequences he had so desperately sought to avoid by letting Rocco take the fall were now waiting for him, compounded by his perjury and the initial cover-up. The drive home was silent, the car filled with the ghosts of what had been said and what had been broken. At the Morgan penthouse, the confrontation that had been brewing since his first words on the stand finally erupted. How could you do this, Danny? Jason's voice was low, controlled, but the intensity beneath was terrifying. How could you let an innocent person, your best friend, face a trial for your actions? That's not the man we raised you to be. I know! Danny shouted, all his pent-up guilt and fear exploding out of him. Don't you think I know that? I've been living in hell. But you don't get it, Dad. You've never been afraid of anything in your life. You're Jason Morgan. People are scared of you. I'm just your son. I have to be perfect. I have to be better. I can't just make a stupid, human mistake because my mistake becomes a headline. Jason Morgan's son arrested for DUI. I didn't want to be that story. His outburst laid bare the central conflict of his young life. He was not just Danny Morgan, he was the heir to a legacy that was both powerful and perilous. The pressure to transcend his father's history was a burden he had carried silently for years, and it was this pressure that had ultimately broken him, leading him to make a decision that was morally catastrophic. Sam tried to bridge the chasm. We are your parents, Danny. Our job is to love you and protect you, no matter what. We could have helped you. We could have gotten you a lawyer, dealt with the consequences together. Hiding it, letting Rocco suffer, that was the real mistake. It's done now, Danny said, his energy spent, collapsing onto the sofa. I'll face whatever comes next. It's what I deserve. Across town, at the Falconeri house, a different kind of reckoning was taking place. The family was together, physically, but an emotional distance lingered. Lulu held Rocco tightly, as if afraid he would vanish. I knew it, Dante said, finally breaking his silence. He poured a glass of water, his hands steady, but his eyes were haunted. A part of me, in my gut, knew Rocco's story didn't quite add up. The skid marks, the position of the car, but I ignored it. I wanted to believe my son. Why did you do it, Rocco? Lulu asked, her voice soft but pained. Why did you take the blame? Rocco, looking older than his years, shrugged helplessly. He's my brother, Mom. In every way that counts. He was terrified. He looked at me and I saw his whole future crumbling. I thought I was stronger. I thought I could handle it. I didn't know it would turn into a trial. I thought it would be a fine, maybe losing my license for a while. I was trying to protect him, the same way he's always had my back. Dante ran a hand over his face. That's not protection, son. That's enabling. And it almost cost you everything. Loyalty is one of the most important things in the world, but blind loyalty, that can destroy you. It nearly destroyed both of you. The following days in Port Charles were dominated by the fallout from the confession. The news spread like wildfire. Morgan Eyre confesses in falconry trial was the headline that indeed, as Danny had feared, splashed across every media outlet. The public opinion was divided. Some saw Danny as a selfish coward who had only confessed when his back was against the wall. Others, remembering their own youthful follies, saw a terrified kid who had finally found the courage to do the right thing, albeit too late. The legal proceedings against Danny began swiftly. With his public confession, a trial was unnecessary. His fate would be decided by a judge. The Morgan family hired the best legal representation, but the evidence was incontrovertible. The focus of the sentencing hearing would be on character and remorse. In a surprising turn, the falconry family became pivotal to that character assessment. Dante, in a move that spoke volumes about his integrity and his complicated affection for Danny, submitted a statement to the court. He did not minimize the damage done to his son or his family. He detailed the anguish and the strain. But he also spoke of Danny's fundamental character, of the good young man he knew, who had made a catastrophic error in judgment born from fear, not malice. He stated that while the betrayal was profound, his family did not wish to see Danny's life destroyed by this single, terrible chapter. Rocco himself requested to speak at the sentencing. When he took the stand, the courtroom was once again packed, the air thick with anticipation. What Danny did was wrong, Rocco began, his voice clear and steady, addressing the judge directly. He lied. He let me take the blame. And for a while, I was really angry about that. But I also made a choice that night. I chose to lie for him. I wasn't a passive victim, I was an active participant in the cover-up. We were both scared, and we both handled it in the worst way possible. He turned to look at Danny, who sat at the defense table, his head bowed. But he stood up in front of everyone and told the truth, even though he knew what it would cost him. That took more courage than anything I did that night. He's my best friend. He made a horrible mistake, but he's not a horrible person. I don't want him to go to jail. I want us to both have a chance to learn from this and move on. His words were a powerful testament to the resilience of their bond, a bond that had been bent to its breaking point but had not entirely snapped. It was a profound act of forgiveness, one that moved everyone in the room, including the stoic judge. In the end, the sentence was stern but reflected the complex circumstances. Danny was sentenced to a period of probation, several hundred hours of community service, mandatory substance abuse counseling, and his driver's license was suspended for 2 years. It was a second chance, a heavy one, laden with conditions and consequences, but a chance nonetheless. The aftermath of the trial left permanent scars on the landscape of Port Charles. The easy, uncomplicated friendship between the Morgan and falconry families was a thing of the past. There was a new caution, a wariness that would take years, perhaps forever, to fully dissipate. Trust, once broken, is not easily mended. For Danny and Rocco, the path forward was uncertain. They were bound together by a shared history that now contained its darkest chapter. The confession in the courtroom had been the end of the lie, but it was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey toward reconciliation. They would have to rebuild their friendship from the ground up, if it could be rebuilt at all, on a new foundation of harsh truth and hard-won forgiveness. The shocking truth had set Rocco free, but it had imprisoned Danny in a cage of his own making, a cage of guilt and public scrutiny. And as the dust settled on the dramatic conclusion of Rocco's trial, both young men were left to grapple with the same painful lesson, that the weight of a lie is often far heavier than the consequences of the truth, and that the road to redemption is long, arduous, and must be walked one difficult step at a time. The atmosphere inside the courtroom felt unusually heavy, thick with tension as the judge entered, his robes sweeping behind him like a dark cloud rolling over the room. Rocco sat stiffly beside Dante, his hands clasped in front of him, eyes darting nervously around the packed gallery. Olivia whispered encouragement from the front row, while Sam took a seat beside Jason, her fingers tapping restlessly against her knee. The case had drawn half the town, everyone desperate to understand how things had spiraled so far, but no one expected the day to unravel the way it did. Danny sat quietly at the back of the courtroom, hunched over, shoulders tense as if carrying the weight of the secret he'd been holding on to for weeks. Jason kept glancing back toward his son, sensing something was wrong, but Danny refused to meet his eyes. As the early testimony began, everything sounded like the typical back and forth that had become standard throughout the trial, one side accusing, the other defending, each witness stepping up to recount their version of the night that had brought Rocco into this legal nightmare. The prosecutor walked confidently to the center of the room, tapping the file in her hand. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear, Rocco Falconeri was present at the scene. His actions contributed to the altercation that resulted in severe injury. Intent or not, involvement is involvement." Lulu sucked in a sharp breath, Dante immediately placing a hand over hers in a quiet attempt to reassure her. Rocco kept his gaze fixed downward, the fear written plainly across his features. Sam shifted in her seat again, whispering to Jason, "This feels wrong. Something's missing. I can feel it." Jason nodded slightly. "I know. Something's off." He looked once more toward Danny, who seemed to be shrinking further into his chair. Midway through the proceedings, the prosecutor called a surprise witness, someone who claimed to have been near the alley the night of the incident. Whispers rippled through the courtroom as people craned their necks to see who would stand. Danny's breath caught in his throat as a teenage boy he vaguely knew took the stand, describing shadows, voices, and seeing Rocco run. But as the boy spoke, Danny's face lost all color, his right leg shaking uncontrollably. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied with the testimony, and retreated to her seat. Dante leaned over to Rocco. "We'll fix this. Don't panic." But Rocco barely heard him, he was staring straight ahead, pale, terrified, and overwhelmed. When the judge ordered a 15-minute recess, the room exploded into murmurs. People stood, stretched, gossiped. Danny shot up from his seat and hurried toward the hallway as if struggling to breathe. Jason followed almost immediately. "Danny. Hey. Stop." Danny froze in the hallway, gripping the edge of the water fountain with white-knuckled intensity. His chest heaved, and when Jason touched his shoulder, he recoiled sharply. "I can't," Danny whispered. "Dad, I can't do this." Jason frowned, lowering his voice. "Can't do what?" "Talk to me." But Danny shook his head frantically. "If I say anything, everything changes. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean to make it worse." His voice cracked, tears forming. Sam approached, alarmed when she saw him trembling. "Honey, breathe. What's wrong?" Danny squeezed his eyes shut. "Mom, the trial, Rocco, it's my fault." Jason exchanged a stunned glance with Sam, both instantly alert. "Danny," Jason said softly, "what do you mean it's your fault?" But Danny only shook his head again, whispering, "I can't. Not here." Sam stepped closer, cupping her hands around his cheeks gently. "Sweetheart, listen to me. Whatever this is, whatever you're holding on to, if someone's going to get hurt because of it, if Rocco might lose everything, then you need to speak up." Just then, Dante exited the courtroom, overhearing the tail end of the conversation. He approached cautiously. "Is something going on?" Danny stiffened, looking like he was about to pass out. Jason exhaled heavily. "Dante," he looked down at his son. "Danny has something he needs to tell you. And the court." Danny's eyes snapped open, horrified. "Dad, no! I'm going to ruin everything." Sam wrapped an arm around him. "No, honey. Keeping the truth inside is what ruins everything." When the recess ended, Danny walked back inside with Jason and Sam beside him like bodyguards guarding something fragile. People noticed immediately, his tear-stained face, trembling hands, the way he looked seconds away from breaking. Dante exchanged a whispered update with his attorney, who gave a cautious nod. Suddenly, the judge glanced toward the gallery. "Is there an issue?" Danny swallowed hard and stood. Your Honor. I need to speak. The entire courtroom erupted before the judge lifted his gavel. Order. Young man, identify yourself. Danny cleared his throat. Danny Morgan. Jason closed his eyes as the judge continued, approach, Mr. Morgan. Danny's feet felt like cement blocks as he slowly walked to the stand. Sam reached for Jason's hand, squeezing tightly. Dante whispered to Lulu, I don't know where this is going. Lulu whispered back, I'm scared to know. Once sworn in, Danny stared down at his lap, unable to look at Rocco, Dante, or even the judge. The prosecutor stepped forward, arching a brow. Danny, you requested to speak. You understand you are under oath? Danny nodded. Yes. The attorney folded her arms. And what exactly is it you believe the court needs to hear? Danny hesitated, looking toward Jason. Jason offered a small nod of reassurance. Danny finally forced the words out. Rocco didn't start the fight. He didn't cause what happened. I did. Gasps filled the room. Dante shot to his feet. What? Danny, what are you talking about? The judge silenced him. Danny's voice shook violently. I was there. That night. I wasn't supposed to be, but I followed Rocco. I heard him say he was going to meet someone, and I thought he might be in trouble. When I got there, I saw everything happening, and I panicked. The prosecutor narrowed her eyes. Are you claiming responsibility for the altercation? Danny nodded, tears spilling over. Yes. Rocco didn't touch that guy. I pushed him. I shoved him because I thought he was about to hurt Rocco. Rocco's mouth dropped open, shock and confusion washing over him. Danny, what? But Danny shook his head vigorously. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to tell you to lie. I just told you to run because I thought it'd be my fault and Dad would be disappointed in me. I never thought it would turn into a trial or someone getting hurt. Sam covered her mouth, tears forming. Jason's jaw tightened as he fought to stay composed. The prosecutor paced slowly. Young man, this is a serious claim. Why come forward now? Danny wiped his face. Because I couldn't breathe anymore. Watching Rocco sit here, thinking he might go to juvie or lose everything because of something I did? I couldn't take it. I was scared before, but now I can't let Rocco pay for my mistake. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Rocco stood suddenly, face red, voice shaking. Why didn't you tell me? I thought I ruined everything.